I'm Kevin O'Connell, and I'm the Director of the Office of Space Commerce at the U.S. Department of Commerce. I've been in this job a little over 4 months at this point, and it has been a real blur so far with so many different commercial space activities, as has already been reflected. The mission of our office is to foster the conditions for the economic growth and technological advancement of the U.S. commercial space industry. So the topic of my talk today, of course, is the trillion-dollar space economy. How do we get there? This is not a casual question, and we should really think objectively and critically about the pathways to that. Today, the global space economy, as has already been said, is roughly a $400 billion economy, of which about 80% is commercial activity, and the United States commercial industry captures about 45% of that activity. We used to think about space activities in the United States as being concentrated in a few key areas: Florida, California, and of course the great state of Texas. But the fact is that there's not a single part of this great country that isn't deeply affected by the space industry today. That's very exciting, and it's a very promising time, both nationally and internationally, where space is being affected at an unprecedented speed. We used to think about space as an area where you'd say something is about a decade away, but in fact today it might be 2 years or it might even be 2 months away. The topic of the trillion-dollar space economy is not a pure invention. A number of independent assessments calculate rapid growth, or assess, I should say, rapid growth between now and 2040. One estimate from the Bank of America places the space economy near almost $3 trillion by that same time frame. This is a topic we actually talk about routinely with Secretary Ross at the Commerce Department. How do we accelerate growth in this area? How do we encourage movement toward that economy? What impediments are in the way to prevent us from getting to that economy? The Secretary is a great promoter of commercial space, both at home and obviously abroad. What I'd like to do in my short time here this morning is to talk about some of the key elements of how we get to that trillion-dollar economy. Let me start, Vanessa mentioned it this morning, let me start by highlighting the Trump administration's intense effort to encourage the U.S. space industry as a matter of innovation, of commercial and economic benefit, and of course, national security. Beginning with the reestablishment of the National Space Council in 2017, the administration has strongly emphasized through Space Policy Directive 2 on deregulation of commercial space activities and Space Policy Directive 3 on space traffic management. The Department of Commerce is deeply involved in the execution of these directives, but Commerce, of course, is only one player in the administration's whole-of-government strategy when it comes to space. Now, what does that mean? Especially when I'm in international audiences, folks ask me about what's the philosophy that underpins it, what's actually behind this idea of whole-of-government, and it's not that complex. It means that the government works intensely as an interagency to raise and solve issues that impede U.S. industry, among other things. Where we can't resolve them, they're elevated to higher levels, even up to the cabinet level. Then every 3 months or so, we get to sit before Vice President Mike Pence and the National Space Council to report out on our progress. This approach has actually imparted a speed to traditional bureaucratic movement that's not often seen in such complex areas at the intersection of technology and public policy. With that in mind, let's return to our conversation about the trillion-dollar space economy. What I'd like to do again is to talk about some of the key elements that I see as part of it, the building blocks, if you will, that we will need to realize that vision. Keep in mind, and everyone in this audience knows this, that nothing here is automatic and that there will be both speed bumps and failures along the way. The first element is continuous disruption and innovation stimulated by a wide variety of technology and business model developments. Where do we see this happening? First, in continued disruption of what I'll call traditional commercial models in areas like remote sensing, communications, navigation, and even weather. Let's look at my favorite, remote sensing, as an example. Disruption is taking place as verticals beyond defense, mapping, agriculture, insurance, to name just a few, expand rapidly. The entire planet is imaged at least once a day. Commercial entities are collecting new phenomena and using new platforms to gain unique information. Disruption also takes place as firms incorporate non-space data for a much richer understanding of our planet and more precise commercial service offerings. And the cycle then continues. As we have new areas that we can understand better, that promotes new kinds of sensing, new kinds of analytics behind it. And so the cycle continues. We see this in location-based services, for example, which are expanding, and even in more precise weather predictions, a combination of space and non-space capabilities are growing as well. NOAA's performance, I shout out to my agency, NOAA's performance during the recent East Coast hurricanes was exceptional, and our ability to predict storm surge allowed for earlier decision-making and actually saving lives. Second, as those commercial services mature, newer service offerings, and many are represented here in satellite servicing, space debris removal, additive manufacturing, and space tourism, and others will emerge. The first two, as we'll discuss, will actually change the economics of space, while the latter two will open up new horizons. I guess I've been disappointed because I have not seen a lot of writing about how satellite servicing and space debris removal will actually change the entire economics of space. Typically has more of a defense flavor to it. Key here, Marco just hit on this in his talk, will be to create a permissive regulatory environment to let credible businesses take a shot at new space concepts from across the spectrum of traditional and new space companies. I'm not a fan of the overuse of the old space, new space concept. The second element includes a robust and agile finance and insurance environment for the space industry. Both are important surrogates for both risk and confidence for the U.S. government. Aside from the billionaire investors, there continues to be strong and growing financial support for the space industry. Bryce Space and Technology, for example, assessed over $18 billion invested in space startups since 2000, the bulk of which has been since 2012. And that trend continues, that increased investment. Some of you have heard me tell a story that in my first weeks at Commerce, I attended an event in New York City with about 50 people representing $2 trillion of private capital for investment in the space community. Even so, one of the missing components of space finance are the larger institutions, banks, whose participation will be necessary to achieve both our longer-term commercial visions and our ambitions to return to the moon and Mars. And again, it won't be the last time said today, but again, congratulations to our NASA colleagues for the extraordinary landing of the InSight spacecraft on Mars yesterday. Along these lines, the department will host a Space Investment Summit on December 12th to talk about involving, as my boss would say, the entire capital spectrum in the commercial space business. The space insurance business is also changing. As our understanding of the space environment deepens and our experiences with new space concepts and business models mature, the insurance industry will be a necessary partner to encourage investment. Insurance will move generally from a total loss model to one which provides a larger portfolio of insurance products to a very changing space industry. The third element includes space situational awareness and space traffic management. As space becomes more congested, including wholly new concepts and platforms ranging from CubeSats to mega constellations, there's an urgent demand for an improved understanding of the threat to satellites and human spaceflight systems like the ISS. Today, of course, that function is performed by our partners in the Department of Defense, but Space Policy Directive 3 requires the Department of Commerce to establish a civil SSA agency to provide basic SSA data services free to commercial users. This is also an area ripe for disruption. Why? Because an emerging industry, or perhaps a set of industry segments, holds new ideas, exciting and diverse new ideas about space sensing, analytics, visualization, and other capabilities designed to greatly improve the accuracy of positioning and other conjunction-related data, and thereby space traffic management. At Commerce, one of the main ideas we are working on is an open architecture data repository where companies can showcase new capabilities either on their own or in tandem with partners. We will build on a continuing flow of information from the DoD to add new capabilities for new insights. Greatly improved SSA will not only enhance offerings like satellite servicing and space debris removal, but it will change the economics of space entirely. As I told our European allies in Austria a couple of weeks ago, it will also continue to involve our allies, even as improved SSA transforms the entire U.S. enterprise. One of the issues that we're discussing presently is how allied commercial entities might participate in the open architecture data repository. The fourth element related to the trillion-dollar space economy involves talent. More folks like the good folks in this hall today and many others around the country and the world. I'm hoping to visit a local high school tomorrow, Booker T. Washington High School, to hear about an exciting space technology program there. Current estimates place the employment figures for the U.S. space industry at about 200,000 people. My worry, a personal worry, is that that figure may actually be undercounted based on the way we capture the space industry within our economic data. We'll be making a report to the National Space Council in early 2019 on this topic. Moreover, there's actually a worry that we don't have enough talent and diversity of talent to satisfy the trillion-dollar space economy. The Space Foundation reports that the sector's workforce continued to decline in 2016. What that means is that while we certainly continue to need the scarce technical skills, we're also going to need a wide range of technicians, business case developers, analytics specialists, applications developers, teachers, and even accountants in order to satisfy the demands of the trillion-dollar space economy. Finally, a fifth and related element is improving our understanding, that's analysis, and our narratives, that's explanation, about the impact of space on Earth. To my previous point, I don't think that we sufficiently capture the economic benefits of space as it affects all of our daily lives. I happened to be speaking at an event recently, and I asked a young man what would happen if the GPS constellation was no longer available. He pulled out his cell phone, pulled up the mapping application, and said, "I guess I wouldn't be able to use this app anymore." Okay, I said, "Son, you have a much larger problem on your hands than just that." Okay, folks do not fully understand the impact of space on their lives. We have to do a better job of explaining it and understanding it. To conclude, these are at least some of the key elements that I believe will be essential to the trillion-dollar space economy. But it won't be automatic, as I already said. Key innovations in launch and spectrum and how we manage them are needed, as will continuing responsible interactions between the U.S. government and industry, as well as governments worldwide. International competition is heating up as governments want to both leverage and benefit from the trillion-dollar space economy, both in its own right and as the backbone of other innovations like telemedicine and rural development, for example. At the Department of Commerce, consistent with National Space Council direction, we're trying to set up a one-stop shop for industry's advocacy and regulatory needs. This is a very important area for collaboration, as industry is often aware of government concerns in the regulatory arena, about safety and security especially, and has important ideas about how to mitigate them within their own business models. We've been spending a lot of time on this recently back in Washington. One of the things we're also working on right now is a toolkit for entrepreneurs to leverage various parts of the department, whether the International Trade Administration, the Commercial Remote Sensing Regulatory Affairs Office, or, and I suspect not everybody in this room has heard of these two organizations, the grant-making authorities of the Economic Development Administration and the Minority Business Development Agency, both inside the Commerce Department. And both of those two organizations have issued space commerce grants within the last year and will continue to do so. In closing, I'll say thank you so much for your efforts to drive us toward the trillion-dollar space economy. I'll look forward to your questions at some point during the day. Thanks very much.